All right, today we're going to tackle a really sobering but absolutely crucial topic. Now, let's be clear, this is not a prediction. This isn't science fiction. What we're doing here is a strategic analysis, a thought experiment, really, based on how geopolitical thinkers see the world right now. We're asking what a third world war could actually look like in our modern era.
So that's the big question, isn't it? If the unthinkable were to happen, what would we actually see? It's a question that has kept military strategists and world leaders up at night for decades. And the answer, well, it has changed so much with new technology and the new powers on the world stage. A massive global conflict like this wouldn't just pop up out of the blue. No, it would be the final, terrible result of pressures that have been building for years. So to start, we've got to look at the rivalries and tensions simmering right now that analysts believe could become that catastrophic flashpoint.
Strategists are keeping a close eye on these three big drivers, and you really have to think of them as being all tangled up together. First, you've got resource scarcity. As things like clean water, oil, and critical minerals get harder to come by, well, the competition gets a lot more intense. At the exact same time, you're seeing this trend of rising nationalism, where countries are saying us first and pulling away from global cooperation. And then, layered right on top of it all, is the tech rivalry, this new kind of arms race for who's going to dominate in AI and cyber warfare. And that right there breeds a whole lot of distrust.
Okay, so in any global war, who you're allied with is everything. You'd have your formal military alliances, with NATO being the biggest one. Then, of course, you've got major powers like the Russian Federation and China, who would be central players. But, the real wild card here is the global south. We're talking about a whole range of influential nations like India, Brazil, South Africa, and many others. And they are not one big group. The decisions they'd make, whether to pick a side or try to stay neutral, could completely change the balance of power. So, with the players set, how would this war actually be fought? Well, I can tell you this. It would look nothing like the old newsreels from the 20th century. Technology hasn't just given us new gadgets for war, it has totally rewritten the rules of the entire battlefield. And this chart just lays it out perfectly. The age of tanks rolling across fields and soldiers in trenches, that's been replaced by autonomous drones and artificial intelligence. Those clear physical front lines on a map, they've given way to invisible digital battlefields where the fight over information is just as important as the fight for land. And instead of just huge armies clashing, the most powerful weapons are now cyber and information attacks, designed to tear an enemy apart from the inside. Which brings us to a really crucial idea. The first shots fired in World War III probably wouldn't be bullets. They'd be bites. A cyber attack would start quietly, by infiltrating an enemy's computer networks. The next move, go after critical infrastructure. Shut down the power grid. Freeze the financial markets. Cut off communications. And all of this gets supercharged by information warfare, using propaganda and disinformation to create chaos and break a country's will to fight before a single soldier even sets foot on their soil. And of course, looming over all of this is the nuclear question. But we need to make a really important distinction here. We're not just talking about the city-destroying bombs from the Cold War. A tactical nuclear weapon is different. It's a much smaller device designed for a specific military purpose on a battlefield, like taking out a hardened bunker or a naval fleet, without necessarily starting a full-blown apocalypse. For more than 70 years, it's been this terrifying idea called mutually assured destruction, or MAD, that's kept the nuclear peace. The logic is brutally simple. If one country launches an all-out nuclear attack, the other side will launch theirs right back, and everybody gets annihilated. That incredible threat has been the ultimate deterrent. But here is the chilling question that modern war analysts are asking. Has that changed? In a new kind of global conflict, could using a limited tactical nuke be seen not as the absolute last resort, but as a twisted new kind of diplomatic tool? A way to shock an opponent and force them to the negotiating table? that nuclear taboo, well, it might be more fragile than we think.
Now, assuming the world somehow pulls back from total annihilation, the conflict would still shatter the global system as we know it. The aftermath wouldn't be a simple return to normal. It would be a great reset, forging a completely new and probably much more dangerous world order.
And you can see on this table just how dramatically the global pecking order could get reshuffled. The United States, the dominant superpower for so long, could find its influence seriously weakened. China, depending on how it gets through the conflict, might emerge as the dominant economic power. And Russia could use its massive reserves of oil, gas, and minerals to become a key influencer in a world that's desperate for resources.
But power wouldn't just shift from one country to another. It would probably shatter. Global institutions we rely on, like the UN and the World Trade Organization, they would likely collapse without international cooperation. In their place, you'd see regional power blocks emerge. Those global supply chains we all depend on would be broken, forcing countries back to localized economies. And there's even a real risk that large, diverse nations could splinter into smaller states under all that pressure. And finally, we have to move past the geopolitics and the strategy to confront the most devastating cost of all: the deep, long-lasting scars this would leave on humanity and on the planet itself. The human cost. It's almost impossible to comprehend. A global war would spark the largest refugee crisis in human history. We're talking about millions upon millions of displaced people, creating a level of social strain around the world that we've just never seen before. And what about the economy? Well, this chart gives you a stark picture. Before the war, we lived in this interconnected world of high global trade. After a war, that system is just gone. The best-case scenario is some limited trade within regional blocs. The result would be a worldwide depression, massive unemployment, and a daily struggle for even basic necessities. And the wounds wouldn't just be physical or economic. As this quote points out, the psychological damage would be staggering. The sheer scale of death and destruction from a modern war would inflict PTSD and mass trauma on a global scale. We would be dealing with a worldwide mental health crisis that would haunt survivors for generations. And the planet itself would bear permanent scars. Even a limited use of tactical nukes could spread radioactive fallout, making huge areas of land completely uninhabitable for centuries. On top of that, the massive pollution and destruction from the war would almost certainly accelerate climate change, making every other crisis even worse. Which brings us to our final haunting question. If humanity did survive, if we were forced to rebuild civilization from the ashes, would we actually learn anything? Or would the seeds of the next war already be sprouting in the ruins of the last? It's a question we should all hope remains purely hypothetical.